Okay, so what we have seen so far is there's an energetic component to raising your awareness, to personal growth, to resolving psychology. Because you have a subconscious self that is based on a certain illusion, and it can't really question that illusion. It's like a computer that can't question its programming. But because you have taken on that illusion, you have generated a certain amount of fear-based energy. And that energy is stored in the self, in your subconscious mind, in your emotional, mental identity body or level of the mind. So we can say you have a subconscious self, for example, that makes you believe that in certain situations it's okay or even necessary to become angry. So when you react to situations through that subconscious self, you're generating anger energy. And some of that energy becomes stored in your emotional mind or body, but it's specifically tied to that subconscious self that generated it. So that means that when you start looking, you might say, I see I have a tendency to become angry in certain situations. Why do I have that? What's the belief behind it? But when you start looking into your subconscious mind, the first thing you encounter is this accumulated energy. And it can be, as I said, so intense that it scares people from looking further, but it can also form a veil that prevents you from seeing the belief behind it. You basically can't see the self, you're just dealing with this energy. So it's a very, very important part of raising your awareness and overcoming psychology to learn how to deal with this psychic energy. And it's really what's missing from traditional psychology. Enormous progress could be made by people if psychology would realize this. So, as I said, there are many ways to deal with this energy because people have had to deal with psychic energy for thousands of years. So meditation, chants, all kinds of things. But what HAP will do is it'll present you with a specific way that is, if you're open to it, if it resonates with you, it can be extremely effective. And so in order to understand this, we have to understand a couple of things. First of all, as I said, everything is made out of energy. And beyond the material world is a spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm is also made up of energy. And the building blocks of the material world is actually spiritual energy that has been lowered in vibration. It's first lowered to the identity spectrum, then to the mental spectrum, then to the emotional, and finally to the physical. So what we can say is that what created the world we live in was actually this flow of energy from the spiritual realm that was lowered in vibration. And what upholds the world is a constant flow of energy that's constantly happening. I talked about that in the spiritual realm you have your spiritual self. And one reason why it's important to realize this is that why are you conscious? What makes you conscious? Well, partly that you are an extension of your spiritual self, but being conscious requires energy. I mean, you have a sense of identity, but it can only exist because there's energy that you are using to uphold that sense of identity. Your thoughts, what are you doing when you're thinking? You're using energy, thought energy. What do you do when you're having feelings? Emotional energy. What powers your physical body? Well, partly physical energy you get through the food, but also the psychic energy that's streaming. Otherwise, your body couldn't exist. It couldn't be alive. It's basically, you can say, your body, your physical body is a machine, but it's alive because it's animated by this flow of energy from the spiritual realm. So the reason why this is important is you are constantly receiving a stream of spiritual energy. Otherwise, you couldn't be conscious, you couldn't think, you couldn't feel, you couldn't act. So, in order to deal with the energy that hides the subconscious self, you simply have to become more aware of this flow of energy, and you have to expand it, and you have to learn to direct it into specific conditions. So you can think about it this way. why do you have the psychology you have right now? Why do you have, for example, a tendency to react with anger? Well, it's because so far you have been using the stream of energy that comes from your spiritual self in an unaware way. You haven't been aware of it. So therefore, the energy comes into your identity body. It becomes colored by your sense of identity. Right? And let's say you have a sense of identity that you are a human being, you are from a particular religion, you are belonging to you're a man or a woman, and this, in your culture, there's a certain role for men and a certain role for women, and you have taken this on. So this actually lowers the vibration of the spiritual energy that's coming into your identity body to a fear-based level many times, because many people see themselves as sinners, for example, or as being in conflict with other people. So the vibration of the energy is lowered, and there's the fear-based level. So we can basically say the energy comes in with a love-based vibration, which is simply just a certain frequency, but it can be lowered below that. And so then that energy then flows into your mental body, where it colors your thoughts, because it's already been lowered to a certain vibration. It's already taken on a certain matrix based on your sense of identity. So now your thoughts, you're thinking within the mental box created in your identity body. And that lowers the energy even further. And that lower energy sets the stage when it goes into the emotional body for certain negative feelings, like fear or guilt or shame, whatever it may be. And so now you have an accumulation of this fear-based energy. And in order to overcome that, you have to become aware consciously of this flow of energy. And you have to learn to do two things: to increase it and to direct it for a specific purpose. And as I said, people have had to deal with this for thousands of years, and they have found various ways to do it. So there are many ways to do it. But what HAP will do is present you with a specific way. And this is based on a realization of what the spiritual realm really is like. And again, we're not going to go too much into it, because I have done that in a number of other videos if you want to look at it. But what I will say is this. The idea of HAP is there's 144 states of consciousness. You can walk a path of systematically raising your consciousness to the 144th level. There are obvious advantages, rewards for doing this. You resolve the negative psychology that limits you, that causes you to always, for example, have conflicts with other people. You get to feel better about yourself. You get to feel more at peace, more energetic, more creative. You have greater mastery over your own mind and your outer situation. So there's many immediate rewards that are related to your life on Earth. But what happens when you reach the 144th level, which is the highest level you can reach on Earth? Well, it's basically, we can say, as I mentioned before, the Earth is an educational institution. It's a schoolroom. So at the 144th level, you have the option to take the final exam. You don't necessarily have to, but you can. You can take the final exam. That means you graduated from Earth. And what happens then? Well, you rise to the spiritual realm. You basically, the conscious you reunites with your higher self, and you become an ascended being, because you are ascending from Earth. You are ascending from the level of vibration and energy that makes up Earth. You are ascending to the spiritual realm. You now become a permanent and immortal, timeless being. And you can say this process has been there for a very, very long time on Earth. Are there other beings who have done that? Yes, of course. Many beings have taken embodiment on Earth, gone down to the 48th level, even gone into separation and duality, and then they have walked the path and they have ascended. So they exist in the spiritual realm. Now they have, over time, they've been called many different things. Everything from angels to gods to guides and teachers. HAP simply calls them ascended masters, because this indicates that They have ascended from earth by mastering their own mind. So they are ascended masters. And so now we can reverse our direction and say, okay, so we have said that there's a spiritual realm, and that spiritual realm must be beyond time, at least as we see time here on earth. So there was a time where the material world we live in didn't exist. There was only the spiritual realm. And the material world was created out of the spiritual realm. But who created it? Well, obviously not the ascended masters who ascended from earth, but other beings in the spiritual realm created our world. I have a video called How the World Was Created, which goes into detail with this. But what is important to realize here is, originally, our entire world, the world we live in, the 4 levels, was created by beings in the spiritual realm. And just for the sake of simplicity, I also call them ascended masters. And so, these beings created our world by taking their own spiritual energy and lowering it in vibration. In other words, the stream of energy that created and is upholding our world came from these ascended masters. And it's still flowing. It's constantly flowing. So what you can learn to do is to consciously invoke energy from these ascended masters. And this is something that people have learned to do in various ways throughout the ages. There's really nothing new about it. But what HAP does is it has specific tools for doing this. And these tools are based on using the power of your voice, the spoken word, so to speak, in reciting certain sentences, certain rhymes. And there's 2 forms of this. There's one that's called decrees, which are short sentences, verses that rhyme. And then there are some that are called invocations, which is a combination of what we might call an affirmation and then a decree. And once you get into it, it's not as complicated as it sounds. So the idea is that the ascended masters understand our situation. As I said, some of them have actually ascended from earth, but others have not. But they still understand our situation, our predicament. And they understand that we need this high-frequency energy in order to transmute the low-frequency energy and free ourselves from the downward pull of this energy. And they have made these techniques, decrees and invocations, available to us. And we can use them. I have personally been using these since 1984, where I really started using them. And I can attest that they are really, really effective. I'm always reluctant to say that something is the most effective, because it's so individual what people need. But if any of this resonates with you, if any of what you have learned so far on HAP resonates with you, I encourage you to give it a sincere try. Really see if it works for you. I was very reluctant myself in the beginning to do it, because I think I've spent many lifetimes before this lifetime in monastic settings where you would meditate. So I was very used to going within silently. So all of a sudden going without by saying these things and other people might hear it was an adjustment for me. But once I got over it and started doing this, I could actually feel a flow of energy. When I was reciting these decrees and invocations, I could feel a flow of energy from the Ascended Masters flowing through me. And the important thing about the decrees and invocations is that you can make calls for the energy, the spiritual energy, to be directed into specific conditions that you see in your psychology. You can also make calls for specific conditions on Earth, but that's a little bit beyond what we're talking about here with HAP, because we're focused on your personal growth. But so let's say you become aware you have a pool of shame energy. Well, you can make calls to specific Ascended Masters and direct the energy into transforming that shame energy. This doesn't mean that you're over the problem, because as I've explained, the energy is a veil that hides the structure of the self, the illusion of the self. So you still have to be willing to look at the self and overcome the illusion, but it's much easier to look at the self when you don't have the energy to deal with. And so there are actually there are sort of 3 specific types of spiritual energy that you can evoke. There are actually many more, but to get started and without being too overwhelmed in the beginning, it's important to focus on 3. One of them is spiritual protection. So you think about this, as we've said, your mind is an energy field. I mean, many people who are open to spiritual teachings know the concept that there's an aura around your physical body. Actually, this is it's sort of a misunderstanding based on science, where we have learned from children that we have a magnet, and there's a magnetic and an invisible magnetic field around the magnet, and the magnet creates the magnetic field. So we come to think, when you hear about an aura, we come to think that, oh yeah, the physical body creates the aura. But that's not the case, because as I've said, your total energy field has 4 levels. The highest is the identity, then the mental, then the emotional, and then the physical. So the lowest part of your identity, or your energy field, is the physical body. The physical body does not create your emotional body. It may affect it to some degree. The physical body doesn't create your mental body. It doesn't create your sense of identity. It's your identity body that sets the pattern for your thoughts, that set the pattern for your feelings, that set the pattern for your actions, but even many aspects of your physical body. Diseases, for example, are an effect of what is in the 3 higher bodies, just as your actions are. So, in reality, your total existence in the material world is an energy field. And this was kind of a long story, but the point is, your personal energy field exists within the larger energy field of the collective field of all human beings. And when you look at history and you look at the world today, you can see that there must be some very low energies in that collective field. So much anger, so much hatred, so much shame and guilt that have been created in this energy field. So obviously, it is very important to protect your personal energy field from that collective field, to seal your personal energy field. I mean, it's such an obvious thing when you see it. And I remember coming to see this, and it had a tremendous effect on me, on my well-being, because I'm a spiritual person, which means I'm sensitive. I'm sensitive to energy. I'm what you call an empath, where I'm sensitive to other people's feelings. And most people I met who are open to self-improvement, self-transcendent, spiritual growth, they are very sensitive people. And what are we sensitive to? Energy. And that sensitivity opens our energy fields to all kinds of influences from the collective. So many people I've met on the spiritual path have been burdened by negative energy from the collective field, from their family members, from their spouses, their children. And once you learn to invoke spiritual energy, there's especially a blue flame, electric blue energy, that can protect you, seal your personal energy field from all of these influences. It can have a tremendous effect on your well-being, on your sense of peace. It's just amazing. Then the other kind of energy you can invoke is a white energy that can cut you free. Because what can happen is that through a certain subconscious self, you can have a tie, for example, to other people. And that gives them an inroad into your consciousness, where they can influence you, but they can also, energy can stream into your field that can overwhelm you. Negative energy or positive energy can be sucked out. So you can learn to invoke this white energy to cut you free from these ties. Now again, you can say, why do you have a sensitivity that other people can exploit? Why do you have maybe a tie to other people? Because you have subconscious selves. So you can't just use the decrees and invocations and think that's going to do it. You have to look at the subconscious selves and resolve them. But the thing is, again, once you overcome the energy, it's much easier to see the self, because you don't have the energy veil that hides the self. And then finally, the final energy that it's important to learn to invoke from the beginning is what we can call a violet flame energy, which transmutes fear-based energy to a higher vibration. So you have the blue flame energy that protects you, that shields your energy field, so that there isn't more negative energy coming in, and there isn't positive energy being sucked out that drains you. Then you have the white energy that cuts you free from these ties that also can suck out energy or insert energy. And that creates a certain calm. And then you use the violet flame energy to transmute the energy that's already in your personal energy field. And once you have done that, let's say you become aware that you have a tendency to feel shame. Once you start invoking the violet flame energy to transmute that energy that's accumulated in your personal field, it becomes so much easier for you to see the self behind it and to see the illusion it's based on. And you can come to that point, basically you can put it this way. As I said, the essence of overcoming a subconscious self is that the conscious you steps outside of it. But one of the things that prevents the conscious you from stepping outside of it is the energy accumulated in the self, because the energy pulls on the conscious you. So, for example, you have anger energy stored in your energy field, and the anger energy pulls on the conscious you to become angry. And therefore, the conscious you can't step outside the self and see, oh, it's just based on illusion. I don't have to become angry. There's other ways to react to this situation. But once you transmute that energy with the violet flame, by invoking the violet flame energy, there comes a point where all of a sudden, without even necessarily consciously doing it, it's like all of a sudden you have a situation that you have, a similar situation you've had many times, but now it's like you're looking at it from the outside. You're not really engaged in it. You're not identified with the energy. You're just standing there and saying, why am I reacting like this? I don't have to react like this. And this can happen spontaneously. It can also happen as a result of a more conscious process. But I've experienced many times that all of a sudden I just see it. I'm outside the self and I'm looking at it and saying, oh, I don't have to react this way. I can let this go. And it can be a tremendous help on your path. I would say, this isn't exclusive. This technique of invoking spiritual light isn't exclusive to HAP. You can have many spiritual or psychological modalities out there that you have already been using. And I'm not saying you have to stop using it. What I'm trying to say is, by learning to invoke spiritual energy, you can enhance virtually any kind of modality that helps your psychological growth, your self-transcendence. It's just an amazing effect this can have. But the thing is, in order to do this in the most effective way, you have to accept that there are these ascended masters, because the energy comes from them. And it's by using their names and these decrees and invocations that they have released that you invoke the energy in the most efficient possible way. Because you could look at it this way and say, the ascended masters, their goal is, of course, our growth. Their goal is to improve conditions, not to make them worse. So you could say that people could misuse this spiritual energy. You had a concept in the Middle Ages. The Catholic Church had these letters of absolution, where you could basically go to a priest and you could buy this certificate that absolved you from a sin you hadn't committed. So you're going to a party on Saturday night, it might get a little wild, you buy this letter that absolves you from the sins you might commit at this party, so that you can go there and sin with good conscience and feel like you're already absolved from it. So it's a little bit the same with decrees. You could theoretically have people who engage in anger, they're burdened by the anger energy, and then they invoke the violet flame to transmute the energy. Now they feel good again, but they refuse to look at the self. So next week they engage in anger again. And you can keep doing this. And that's not what the masters want to encourage, because that doesn't promote growth. So that's why you have to invoke the light of the masters by using their names and these tools they've given, because then they can decide how much light to release to you. And the deciding factor is, are you using it to grow, or are you just using it to tread water and feel good? But you're not really committed to transcending the psychology. So that's why they have given these tools, so that there's a certain safety factor built in. They can't very easily be misused. And as I said, looking back at my path over the 49 years, it's the most efficient tool I have found. Again, it's not necessarily efficient for everybody, but I encourage you to at least give it a serious try. If you followed me this far, give it a serious try and experience for yourself whether it works for you.